To iterate on Ryan, I'm probably wrong, and I'm not as funny as Latif, so I'm sorry to begin with. And I tend to move around a lot when I speak, so if I block somebody's view of the presentation, it's okay. My name is Asaf Karen, and I'm going to present today a paper that I wrote together with my colleague and co-author Karen El-Azhari, Miss Karen El-Azhari, which is over here. Karen, raise your hand. We come from a company called Variant, but because this has nothing to do with our day-to-day job, I'm not going to present Variant or what we do. A bit about myself before we go on. Today I am the product manager for cyber intelligence and cybersecurity products inside Variant. I grew up professionally in the Israeli Defense Forces as an officer dealing with information security and cybersecurity. And then I moved to the Israeli e-government. The Israeli e-government is the governmental ISP for Israel. I will talk a bit about that. What I did there was the director of IT security and cybersecurity. And from there I moved on to my own consulting firm and then into Variant, and that's about it, about myself. I'd like to talk today about the paper we've written. I want to start with the background for this, the background and the rationale for the paper. Then move on to talk about something we have devised in this paper, which is called the Cyber Attack Susceptibility Index. It sounds big, not that big, but interesting. And then move on to a review of the world based on the index that we've developed, and then go on to say what we think can be done with this framework for the measurement of the internet as a critical infrastructure or for the susceptibility of countries to be attacked via the internet. So the research rationale was something like this. The internet is becoming more and more the next agora or the next city square. People are exchanging ideas, exchanging money, exchanging gossip, pictures in Instagram, tweets, stuff like that on the internet. And it's becoming more and more a part of the modern life of people. So probably more so in Western states or in developed countries than in developing countries, but also in developing countries recently. And this is based on the rapid growth of ICT in countries since 2001 to up until today. And this is true in developed countries, and we've seen a very large growth in developed countries on IT and IP classes up until 4 or 5 years ago. But since 4 or 5 years ago, we've seen a very large development also in developing countries. And developing countries are getting into new technologies, like IPv6 or like LTE. And we'll be seeing a very consistent growth since 2001 in that regard. On the other hand, governments and citizens and businesses are understanding the idea of critical infrastructure. We are listening and hearing more and more about critical infrastructure. It started out from electricity, went on to water, transportation, but we're hearing more about banking in the recent days, also about even food supply, and this got us starting to think about critical infrastructure and whether the internet itself can be a critical infrastructure. And this is a good question because this changes globally between countries, and we wanted to get to some kind of understanding how we can measure whether the internet is a critical infrastructure and whether a country is susceptible to a cyber attack on its internet. Now, I'll talk a bit about the background for the research, how it started, but you can guess that it has something to do with the Estonian DDoS attacks in 2007 and the Georgian DDoS attacks in 2008. Also, something which I haven't mentioned and is written here is the growing rate at which governments and businesses are supplying more services on the internet. I come from Israel. We have a very, very strong e-government system, also here in Estonia, and in other places around the world, specifically in Europe and in North America, where you have a very strong service-oriented government on the internet. Also businesses. Banks are moving most of their work to the internet, also other businesses. I do my grocery shopping on the internet. So this is something more and more we're seeing around the world. The idea was born 3 years ago. It was born actually here in Estonia, together with Dr. Gears, Dr. Kenneth Gears, which I promised I'd mention his name. So now he has to view my presentation on video because he's never got to see me present. It was born, and we were talking about this idea about how countries are going to be attacked on the internet and whether internet is a critical infrastructure. And then we said, okay, let's try and find some way to measure this. And we wanted to do initially a questionnaire. We want to say, okay, let's try to choose countries around the world in different developing stages of their internet and different developing stages of their services and their reliance on the internet, and send a questionnaire to people from the government industry, from the government sector, from the industry sector, from the critical infrastructure sector, from the defense sector, and ask them what they feel about the internet and their country's ability to defend the internet and their country's ability or their country's reliance on the internet. So that was our basic premise. We wanted to do that. But in order to do that, we had to start thinking about some kind of index in order to choose these countries. And we started gathering data for choosing these countries. And actually, we have never come to actually doing the research and the questionnaires, but the data that we've gathered was the basis for the cyber attack susceptibility index that we're presenting today. And it's, I think, interesting enough on its own as a framework or as a basis for something that other researchers and other companies can use. I didn't mention the Operation Cast-led attacks. I will mention them in the next few slides because they have been my personal experience with distributed denial of service attacks and defacement and the level of effect that it had on the Israeli citizens and the Israel as a whole at the time of these attacks. What did happen half a year ago when I got into Verint, we started looking at who are going to be our customers for cybersecurity or cyber defense products. So I said, oh, I've got an index. And we've started looking into the data getting in, and we've started updating the need for commercial reasons. So this index allowed us to vaguely divide the countries we are interested in and the countries we are probably not interested in because they're not developed enough or they can't appreciate our products enough. So this is something that can also be used for commercial reasons. I'll drink some water. I'm talking too fast. Okay, I want to start actually not talking about the cyber attacks and the CAS index in the beginning. I do want to talk about the Operation Cast-led. Operation Cast-led, anybody here knows what Operation Cast-led was, besides Karen? Yeah. Okay, it's more known outside of Israel as the Gaza War. It's an operation done by the Israeli Defense Forces in 2008, between 2008 to 2009. And it is... Okay, sorry. It's an operation inside Gaza Strip, which was after the kidnapping of Gilad Shalit and an attempt to release him, which brought it into a 3-week military operation, very, very on the very kinetic side of affairs. So this wasn't a cyber attack. This was a war. But on the side of that war, we did have a cyber attack or cyber war because we've had Israeli hackers attacking Palestinian and Arab sites, and we had cyber jihadists attacking Israeli sites. And we did see a very large rise in the amount of defacements across the Israeli cybersphere, not just on the Israeli government. And you can see here the numbers. We've had probably in 3 weeks double what we have in a normal month. And Israel is a big target for defacements as a whole. So we've seen a very large attention on the Israeli cybersphere at the time. There were minor successes versus government sides. So we've seen attacks and defacements on the water authority, on the Hillel Yafa hospital. This was specifically a very, very bad, very malicious attack because what they did, they put pictures of mutilated Israeli soldiers in that site, and they used this in order to do psychological warfare on the Israeli citizenship or the Israeli citizens. We have seen the Central Bureau of Statistics, the Israeli Export Institute, and the several municipalities' websites that were both defaced and DDoSed against. Most government sites were not defaced. They were not, and I'm talking about the critical major sites, the IDF spokesman sites, the Prime Minister's office, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Israeli government portal and others that were not defaced. And they were probably not defaced because they were under the protection of the Israeli e-government agency. And I would like to talk about that for a second. The Israeli e-government agency was formed in 1997. The official reason for its forming was that the Israeli government wanted a central ISP for all of its agencies. That's the official reason. The unofficial reason is that we ordered one Cisco router, we got two, and we had a spare one. So we didn't know what to do with it, so we connected the government to the internet. This is the central ISP for all of the government agencies, and it's been doing cybersecurity or or information security, IT security, as we knew it 5 years ago, since 1997. So it has a very big track record. And I have a former colleague of mine that says that we had 3 problems, or they have 3 problems. One is that they're Israel, so they get attacked a lot. The second is that they're the government, so they get attacked a lot. And the third, that they're the Israeli government. So it is tasked with the creation, operation, and securing the Israeli government ISP. And it holds all of the government websites and e-services, and also all of the government employees' internet connection. It runs a 24/7 cybersecurity operations center, and it did run it during Operation Castled. I am not going to talk about how we mitigated the attacks. This is a completely other presentation. I have it on my computer if you want, but not for this one. But it also holds cert.gov.io, the Israeli government cert, about that. During Operation Castled, we've seen 4 DDoS attacks on the e-government itself. These were SYN floods, very simple, yet very effective. Specifically, if you have, I wouldn't say the vendor, but a specific firewall that drops after 5 million connections, then you're in a problem. These were, since this was SYN flood, we were seeing spoof IP addresses. So we've been seeing SYNs coming in from all of the US embassies and all of the US military bases, and some from CII. So this was a very, very nice bunch of attackers that we've seen. But the thing is, it was so big for us that the internet backbone was hindered. We have, the Israeli e-government has something like 600 megabits per second connection. It isn't big, but it also isn't very small for an enterprise. We're talking about an enterprise of around 60,000 people. But the attacks came to 3 gigabits. So our ISPs, our service providers, the tier 2 that we were using, were hindered themselves. So we were seeing an effect on an attack on a single site inside the e-government to the entire Israeli backbone. And this is probably what got me, and later on also Karen and Kenneth, thinking about the reliance of people on the internet. We've seen 4 attack waves, intensifying in every wave. We've seen 15 million connections per second at the peak. It was very nice. You scratch your head and say, okay. We had downtime, 5 to 20 minutes each time. And again, I'm not going to talk about mitigation. If you want, feel free to come after the presentation and talk to me about that. So, moving on to the Cyber Attack Susceptibility Index. This is based on 2 statistics. Public, available on the internet statistics. One is the internet usage percentage of each country, which is based on the ITU figures and also other figures that are available in the world, specifically the internetworldstats.com site, which is a very nice one. And the UN e-government development index. Any of you familiar with the EDGI? So the UN is doing a very, very nice work in surveying the e-government ratio of different countries. And they're doing it for, I think, 5 to 6 years now. And they just published the 2011 report. It's a very nice report. I suggest for you to go and read it. And they're talking about 3 factors. They're talking about online service index, how governments are giving service to their citizens. They're talking about the telecommunication infrastructure index, which talks about the amount of phones, mobile phones, internet subscription, broadband subscription that each country has. And they talk about human capital index. So the EDGI, the UN e-government development index, is based out of these 3, and you can see how they measure their index. And we've taken this, and we've said that together with the internet stats, this gives us the ability to understand several things. It gives us the ability to understand the public participation on the internet, how much people are participating on the internet, and probably how much they are reliant on the internet. It gives us the ability to understand the level of government involvement and the level of government investment in the internet infrastructure, both from the services and both from the amount of people who are connected to the internet. And it gives us the ability to understand the level of technological literacy in the populace. The bigger EDGI index that they have, probably they are more literate, they have more understanding of internet, they have more understanding of IT, and probably are more reliant on the IT. There is a downside to high availability. This is probably very good if you are in a country. You want to be very public participant, a lot of public participation on the internet. You want to be advanced technologically, and you want to have the investment in internet. But the downside for this is that you have more susceptibility to cyber attack. And I'm choosing countries randomly here, so please don't blame me for that. But if Suriname, which is one of the lower countries in the CAS index, will get a very big distributed denial of service attack, probably not many will notice. However, when Estonia got attacked in 2007, this caused harm to the fabric of life in Estonia. At least that is what the Estonians tell us, and I'm partial to believe them. So the CAS index is the EDGI plus the percentage of population connected to the internet divided by 2, a very simple average. But we've taken this and we've started looking at the data coming at us. And I want to talk to you a bit about the data in a worldwide view and then go into the regions a bit. And then I'll finish my presentation and we can go on to questions if you have or not. You can take a look at the table. I'll give you 5 seconds to appreciate. I'm not going to talk about all the numbers. So I have a nice clock here. I can actually give you 5 seconds. So the biggest, probably the best, the most advanced and the most susceptible regions around the planet are North America and Europe. You can see that Europe has the biggest score by far, but it has lower variance than the United States or North America. So in North America, you have the United States and Canada, and you have the others around it. But you can also take a look at Asia and Oceania. Oceania is Australia, New Zealand, and the rest of the islands in that area, which also have very high variance. So we're saying regions which are probably low in regards to the CAS score. They are less susceptible for attack, less advanced in internet-wise, but they have very high variance, meaning that there are countries there that are very susceptible to attack. These are the top scoring CAS countries. I'm guessing you can't see on the bottom right. I'll go from left to right. With work? Okay.
Military-grade lasers.
Military-grade lasers, okay. I'm going from the left to right. We have Norway and Netherlands and the Republic of Korea, and Sweden and Denmark and United Kingdom and United States, Canada, Iceland, and Australia. Divided by regions, Europe, Asia, North America, and Oceania. Things to look at. Most of the European countries are very high in regards to the percentage of populace connected. But if we see the Asian countries, specifically here, the online service index, both in the Republic of Korea, in the United States, and in Canada, are higher than the rest of the region, than the rest of the countries. So meaning these countries probably have less people connected to the internet, but a better online connection scheme, better e-government service scheme. If we go by region, and here I'm going to stay by my laptop because I have notes. The African region is very, very low in regards to its CAS scores. Not surprisingly, not a very developed continent. Africa probably will be developing a lot in the next couple of years, the next 10 years. But it's not very well connected. And we can see this with most of the connection data. And the green one is the percentage of population connected to the internet is below the 0.1 line, which meaning less than 10% of the people in these countries are connected to the internet. Which means that what probably makes raises the score for the countries is the amount of online connectivity or e-government index that they have. And this is true for most of Africa, except for 2 countries, Nigeria and Morocco, which both have higher percentage of the population connected to the internet than their e-government index. So this is standardized, by the way, so we can use both figures on the same graph. This is interesting to see because Nigeria, as we know, is a hub for cybercrime. Yeah. Who here didn't get a letter from a Nigerian prince? Yeah. Yes, Karen is asking correctly. Who here got the money from the Nigerian prince? Morocco, I don't know why, but probably because these countries have a better internet infrastructure, so the people are there, but the government give less connectivity or less services. Asia is a very interesting country. You can see the changes across the region, and you have 4 countries which are the top of the CAS score. We're talking here about the Republic of Korea, Singapore, Japan, and Malaysia. These are very, very advanced countries. Actually, they are also dominant in the cybersecurity field. So we see some kind of connection here. But the region as a region is not a very, very strong region. And it's probably also very growing. The developing countries do have the tendency to grow and probably see different figures in 5 years. But let's talk a bit about those 4. Those 4, each of one of those has some kind of an attempt to try and influence regional policies. So we have Impact in Malaysia, which is an international attempt to coming outside of Malaysia. We have APCert, which is very, very Japanese and Korean initiative. Very dedicated, or not dedicated, very oriented to Japanese and Korea. And we have Singapore now building the Interpol Center in Singapore. So there is a lot of interest from these countries to influence the rest of the region and try and enforce their capabilities there. I'm not talking about China, which is an anomaly of its own, specifically in the level of their work in the international sphere together with Russia. Yeah. You're searching for China? No. Let me help you. I need to switch. You got it. China is over here. Pretty high, by the way, for a country with not a lot of in the percentage of population connected to the internet. But China is always a different story than the rest of the world. An interesting thing here we're looking at India and Pakistan. So India and Pakistan are 2 neighboring states, probably in the same level of the CAS index and probably in the same, and both competing states as well. But Pakistan has its CAS index because it has very high percentage of connection to the internet, but not a lot of e-government services. On the other, India doesn't have as much people connected to the internet, but they have more government services. So I don't know if any of you are working on Indian-Pakistani relationships, maybe this will help you in some way. Oceania is a mirror image of Asia. I'm not going to talk about it a lot. Australia and New Zealand are a ball game of their own, and the rest are down there. Europe is a very interesting idea. Europe, as you can see, is very high across the board. And this is because it's one of the more developed areas, and a place where countries have been working for a long time in order to develop their internet and their e-services. The top 14 countries are Northwest European countries. The rest are, and then we go to Spain and again to Ireland and Liechtenstein, but Spain is the cutoff here. I regard Spain as South European. You excuse me. But Europe, because it is so strong across the board, has built things like ENISA, which is a very strong regional cybersecurity project, or TFCCERT, the task force, the Tirana task force for cybersecurity incident response teams. So Europe is a very consolidated region in that regard, and we see that in the effects that it has on the political work done by the European countries. Here I want to talk about France and Spain, which are probably the only countries which have less connectivity but more EDGI than the rest of the region. So the people are connected less, but they give more services than the other countries. Israel is in the Middle East. Yeah. I have to, yes, sadly enough for Israel, we're in the Middle East. We would very much like to be part of Europe if you will accept us.
Which continent are you part of?
In Middle East, Asia. Yeah, we're Asian. It's a region of its own, I'm sorry. Israel is a region of its own. So Middle East is the same story. We have several countries which are more advanced than the others. We have several very, very low rated countries because they have not been investing at all in internet or cyber or e-government. And Israel, UAE, Bahrain, and Qatar are the dominant countries in this regard. And we've been seeing it. All of these countries have very strong cybersecurity operations. All of these countries are investing in this field. I can talk about Israel more than I can talk about the other ones, but still. It's interesting to see that Bahrain has a very, very large EDGI index and a lower rate of people connected to the internet, which means that the people that are connected to the internet in Bahrain get a very, very good service from the government and very good service from businesses, but not as much people are connected to the internet, which sits well with Bahrain in my mind, but that's... North America, again, we see Canada and the United States. Here, like we've seen in the graph in the beginning of the presentation, here we see both of them better in EDGI or better in the e-government development index than in the amount of people connected to the internet. Actually, I don't really have much more to say about North America. South America as a whole is a very, very poor country or poor region in regards to their advancement. But it's a very, very solid region, meaning there is no two countries or three countries which are ahead of the rest. And you can see this, the EDGI index in South America rates from 0.41 to 0.61, which is a very, very small rate in regards to what we see in the other countries. So it's a very steady rate. So we can see that not all of the countries, or most of the countries, are giving as much work on e-services as the rest in the region. The only thing that changes here is the amount of people connected to the internet. I have 1.5 minutes left, and I do want to leave 1 hour for questions, so I'll do a quick summary. Okay? Well, whatever I say. What we would like to suggest is there is a tipping point model. There is some place around the CAS index where the internet becomes a critical infrastructure. So we have, from a very, very initial examine or analysis of the results, we have a range. We know that all countries below 0.21, which is India, doesn't have a CIP plan, a critical infrastructure plan, or see the internet as a critical infrastructure. And all countries above 0.61 have a CIP plan. By the way, 060 is Andorra, which is a very small country. Maybe they don't need a CIP plan. Below that, we go to 0.47. But somewhere in that region, internet becomes critical, or the understanding that internet is a critical infrastructure comes in. We suggest the CII score as a measurement basis for future research. We would be happy for people to use it for future research. And maybe we'll get to actually sending questionnaires now and doing our full-fledged research in the near future. Thank you very much.